The world 1.2 million years ago was raw, violent, and untamed. It was an era when nature ruled with unchallenged ferocity, and survival was the law of every breath. The skies were alive with smoke as distant mountains belched fire into the heavens, staining the air with the bitter stench of sulfur. Forests trembled as molten rivers devoured them whole, turning lush green into smoking wastelands. The earth beneath cracked like shattered glass, sending geysers of steam and ash into the air. Every living creature, from the smallest insect to the largest predator, was forced into a frantic race against death. Amid this chaos, a roar thundered across the valleys so deep, so powerful, that even the fire seemed to pause for a heartbeat. It was Kong, the colossal king of the land, his massive frame towering above the ruined forest. His dark fur was speckled with ash, his golden eyes blazing with defiance against the storm of destruction. Kong was not afraid of beasts, not afraid of hunters, but even he could feel the might of the earth threatening to crush him. The ground beneath his feet shook violently, fissures splitting open like mouths of flame, threatening to swallow all in their path. And clinging desperately to his fur was Beauty, a fragile human girl, pale against the blackened world. She was unlike anything in Kong's domain. Where he was strength and thunder, she was small, trembling, yet filled with a courage that glowed through her fear. She had been stranded in this land of giants, lost and hunted, and it was Kong who had claimed Kira not as prey, but as something he could not abandon. Her survival became his duty, though she never asked for it. When the first eruption thundered through the valley, Beauty screamed, her voice barely audible against the roar of the volcano. The sky darkened as a cloud of ash swallowed the sun, and glowing rocks rained from above like the anger of gods. Kong swept her into the cradle of his arm, shielding her with his massive body. Boulders crashed against his back, sparks of fire singed his fur, yet he stood firm. His roar shook the heavens, as though he challenged the very mountain that dared to threaten her life. Through choking smoke and forests set ablaze, Kong ran with a force that shook the ground. His strides were thunder, his leaps across fissures breathtaking. Beauty pressed her face against his chest, her tears mixing with the soot on her cheeks. She whispered words in her tongue, words Kong could not understand, but her trembling voice carried warmth that pierced the chaos. He listened, though the meaning escaped him, and for a moment the sound steadied his furious heart. They reached the river, but it was no longer a river. Boiling, steaming, it surged wildly, carrying dead trees and glowing embers downstream. The waters hissed as molten stone dropped into them, sending plumes of steam into the smoky air. To cross was madness, yet to remain was death. Kong stepped into the torrent, water rising to his waist, then his chest. The heat burned his skin, but he lifted Beauty high above his head, her small form safe against the storm. With every step he growled, a sound both of pain and willpower, until at last he emerged on the other side, his fur soaked, his chest heaving. But the disaster was relentless. Behind them the forest collapsed in fire. Ahead the cliffs shuddered as rocks cascaded like an avalanche. Kong climbed, each movement a battle. His great hands dug into stone, his feet finding purchase where none seemed possible. Beauty's fingers clutched at him tightly, her eyes wide with terror, yet she did not let go. As boulders tumbled past, Kong pressed his body against the rock, shielding her again and again. His roars echoed against the cliffs, not of fear but of defiance, as though daring the world to strike him down. At the peak, they found a small plateau, the only refuge amid the burning earth. Beauty collapsed against Kong's fur, coughing, her face pale but alive. Kong lowered himself beside her, his chest rising and falling like the waves of a storm. For the first time since the disaster began, there was silence between them, not the silence of peace, but the heavy silence of survival. Kong's golden eyes met Beauty's fragile gaze, and though they shared no words, something passed between them. She placed a trembling hand on his arm, and he did not flinch. In that moment, surrounded by fire, smoke, and ruin, the bond between beast and girl was forged stronger than stone. The world was tearing itself apart, but neither would face it alone. Kong's strength was no longer just his own, it was hers. And her courage, small yet unbreakable, gave him reason to fight against the fury of the earth. The night fell heavy, painted black with ash, yet atop that plateau, A giant and a fragile human girl clung to life. The disaster had only begun, but so had their legend. The days that followed were a trial of endurance. The disaster did not end with fire. The world itself seemed determined to test every breath of life. The ash did not stop falling, blanketing the earth in a suffocating shroud. The rivers, once flowing with clear water, now ran murky and poisoned. Even the air felt heavier, filled with a bitter taste that stung the lungs. Beauty coughed endlessly, her body weakened, yet her spirit refused to yield. Kong, though mighty, was not untouched by the struggle. His fur was singed, his body streaked with wounds, and exhaustion gnawed at his strength. Still, he pressed forward, never allowing despair to consume him. Predators lurked among the ruins. With their hunting grounds destroyed, beasts like the saber-toothed cats prowled with desperation in their glowing eyes. They circled the shadows, watching the small human who seemed an easy target. But every time they crept closer, a thunderous roar split the air, shaking the trees that still stood. Kong stood between her and every threat, his massive frame a wall of defiance. Once, a desperate pack lunged, their fangs glinting in the dim light. Kong fought them with primal fury, his fists breaking stone, his roar scattering the survivors into the smoke. Beauty, though terrified, did not hide her eyes as she watched, not as a helpless girl, but as someone who understood that his battle was for both of them. When hunger clawed at them, it was Beauty who offered strength. She searched the scarred land for roots that had not been scorched, berries clinging stubbornly to half-burned bushes. Her small hands gathered what little remained, and though her stomach cramped with hunger, she shared it with Kong. She pushed the food toward him, whispering softly as if urging him to take it. At first he refused, turning his massive head away, but when her fragile hand touched his arm again, he relented. The gesture, so small, sparked something in him, a fire stronger than the flames that had torn the world apart. The rains came next, cold and merciless. Floodwaters swallowed valleys, rivers burst from their banks, and thunder rolled endlessly across the heavens. Kong carried Beauty above his head, striding through currents that tried to drag him down. His muscles strained, his wounds burned, but he would not let the water claim her. Each step was a battle, yet he never faltered, his eyes blazing with determination. Beauty clung to him, her face pressed against his soaked fur, whispering prayers he could not understand but somehow felt. At last, the storms ended. The earth, though scarred and broken, began to quiet. The skies cleared, revealing the pale glow of the sun through the thinning ash. From a high cliff, Kong and Beauty looked down upon a changed world. Forests had become wastelands, rivers had shifted paths, and mountains had crumbled. But life, stubborn and unyielding, still lingered. Kong's chest heaved as he breathed in the clean air, and Beauty, though weary, smiled faintly for the first time. They had not merely survived by strength or by chance, they had endured because of one another. In Kong's immense shadow, Beauty found protection. In her fragile kindness, Kong found purpose. The disaster had tested them, but instead of breaking them, it had forged a bond unshakable by even the wrath of nature. And so, side by side, beast and girl stood against the horizon of a reborn world, and not as victims of disaster, but as legends of survival.